Have you ever wondered what secrets the Vikings whispered to the sea? Join me as we delve into their ancient rituals and superstitions, uncovering the fascinating world of these legendary seafarers, and discover how their beliefs shaped their lives. It's cold naturally, the kind of cold that pinches the tip of your nose and creeps beneath layers of fur and wool. You're standing near a narrow wooden dock in a fjord still blanketed by the thin breath of early morning mist. In front of you, the ship rocks gently, dark and sleek, carved with snarling dragon heads and twisted runes meant to scare off the sea itself, or anything lurking in it. Around you, the other crew members prepare silently. Some polish weapons that, with any luck, won't be needed. Others mumble prayers under their breath. This is not just a morning stretch before work. It's a departure ritual. You don't just hop onto a Viking longship and row off like you're late for school. That would be suicidal. The sea demands respect, and preferably some offerings. So before you jump into this boring and sleepy story, please take a moment to like my videos and subscribe to my channel, but only if you actually enjoy and feel comfortable with the stories I tell here. Also, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Post it in the comments if you feel like sharing. Prepare to be transported to the harsh yet alluring world of the Vikings as you listen to a mesmerizing tale of their seafaring rituals and superstitions. Let the calming sounds and captivating story lull you into a peaceful slumber. Your feet crunch over frostbitten earth as you approach the ship, but it's not your footsteps you're paying attention to, it's the silence. No one speaks above a whisper this morning, because, according to ancient superstition, the sea could hear. It's not just water out there. It listens, it watches, it waits. The Vikings believed the sea was full of moods, some petty, some wrathful, many entirely bored, but all capable of killing you if you didn't show proper humility. So before boarding, men whisper to it, just short phrases, personal ones, promise, confession, an apology. You murmur something too, feeling slightly ridiculous, until you realize everyone else is doing the same thing with absolute seriousness. One man traces a symbol in the frost on the wooden rail. It looks like a fish caught in a net, or maybe it's a wave curling around a rune. You're not sure, but it reminds you that Viking superstition wasn't just in word. It lived in gesture, in scratches, in breath. If the sea could understand anything, it was repetition and sincerity. There's a red-blonde man with a missing ear. He's one of the older sailors, and he carries a worn leather pouch. From it, he takes a few items: salt, a carved fishbone, and a tiny bag of sand. He walks to the bow, touches the sea with 3 fingers, and flicks each item into the water like he's seasoning soup. You'll see this many times. These aren't offerings to gods. They're messages to the sea itself. A bribe, a charm, maybe a trade. Mainstream historians agree that such rituals, these so-called whisperings, were common across Viking seafaring culture. Less about organized religion, more about raw, nervous respect for the unknown. After all, the gods were far away in Asgard. But the sea? The sea was right there under your boots. You lean down and touch the icy water yourself. For a moment, your fingers go numb. Then you whisper something, doesn't matter what. Something only the sea should hear. There's also a strange rule you're reminded of as you climb aboard. No women can speak before departure. At least that's what they say. Some crews believed that female voices invited bad winds. Others said that if a woman gave her blessing silently, just a nod or touch, it was luckier than any spoken prayer. Historians still argue whether this superstition was deeply rooted or simply regional nonsense, but it stuck around for centuries. Then there's the smell, not just of salt and pine wood, but of mead. Yes, some men drink a small amount before departure, not for courage, but as part of ritual. One sip for Njord, one for the sea, one for yourself. If you spill any, that's good luck. If you don't, maybe just fake a spill when no one's looking. Quirky tidbit for you. Some Viking crews believed that if the first animal you saw on the day of departure was a fox, the whole voyage was doomed. Foxes meant deceit and failure. Birds were better, especially ravens. More on them later. Now, as the longship is pushed away from the shore and you feel the current take you, the silence breaks, but only barely. The oarsmen begin their rhythm, slow and steady, the wood creaking, the water slapping, and the occasional grunt of effort. You're on your way now. The sail is not yet raised. That comes later. First, you must reach the open water. You pass between dark cliffs that seem to lean in close, as if eavesdropping. Even here, deep in the fjords, you can feel the power of the sea waiting. It's not angry, not yet, just watching. Someone taps your shoulder and points to the sky. Circling above is a single black bird, a raven. The men nod. That's a good sign. Not just because ravens are sacred to Odin, but because they almost never appear alone. Where there's one, there's more. And if they fly out to sea and return, you might just survive this. As your ship begins to slip into deeper waters, the crew begins to relax. Not much, but enough. There's a murmur of talk. Someone jokes about how the sea is still hungover from the last crew's singing. You laugh softly. It feels like the beginning of something ancient and powerful. The sea doesn't respond. Yet, the oars dip in rhythm, again and again, each splash like a heartbeat. Your arms are starting to ache already. But you know better than to complain. Not today. Not during the blood of departure. No, it's not a dramatic name made up by modern writers. The Vikings believed that before any voyage, the sea needed to be fed. Sometimes it was symbolic. A splash of ale, a lock of hair, a silver coin kissed and flung into the tide like a very soggy love letter. But sometimes it was more literal. This morning, as you rowed out, you saw it happen. Just before the sail was raised, when the wind was starting to shift in your favor. An old fisherman brought forth a chicken, its feathers speckled with soot and salt. He murmured a few words, twisted the bird's neck in a practiced motion, and let its blood drip onto the deck before flinging the carcass into the water. No one even blinked. Except you, of course. You blinked a lot. This wasn't cruelty. Not exactly. It was an offering. Just like the sea needed whispers, it also needed sacrifice. It was the price of safety. Blood woke the old powers, made the voyage real. The belief was simple. If you didn't give something before the journey, the sea would take something during it. Mainstream archaeology confirms this ritual. Chicken bones and blood residue have been found near Viking docks and ship burial sites across Scandinavia. Some even show signs of being ritually butchered. Not for food, but for omen reading. The practice wasn't uniform, though. Historians still argue whether these blood rites were tied to Norse deities or older, pre-Viking animist beliefs. As you row, you remember that even the wood of the ship was once bathed in blood. Animal sacrifices were sometimes made at the very moment of keel laying, the first spine of the vessel. Supposedly, the blood seeped into the wood grain and made the ship alive. There's a phrase for it, blotkill the blood keel. Creepy? Yes. Effective? According to the crew, absolutely. But it wasn't always chickens. Wealthier shipowners, chieftains, jarls, might offer something grander. A goat, an ox. On one recorded occasion, according to a saga you overheard last night around the fire, a horse was sacrificed. A full-grown stallion, white and wild, its mane braided with bone beads. Its death was said to bring calm seas and wind that always blew homeward. Though, knowing how saga-tellers love to exaggerate, the sea probably still tossed the boat around like a child with a toy. Still, as far as the men were concerned, more blood meant more luck. And don't think they spared themselves, either. On especially dangerous voyages, say, raiding down the English coast or sailing through the treacherous Greenlandic ice, it wasn't unusual for the captain to prick his palm with a knife and smear a few drops on the sail. A symbol of personal commitment. An oath sealed with blood. You once saw a young man slit his tongue instead. He didn't talk for the rest of the week. Maybe the sea liked that. You notice a small pendant swinging from the mast now, made of bone, shaped like a fish. It's stained at the tip with something reddish. Best not to ask. A fun fringe fact? In certain regions of Norway, sailors once believed that cutting your nails before a voyage was bad luck. The bits of keratin were thought to anger the sea spirits, who saw it as careless shedding, like leaving food scraps in a sacred hall. So naturally, you're suddenly aware of how clean your fingernails are. Oops. Also, this one's odd. Some Viking crews believed that blinking too much before departure meant you had a soul unready for travel. A fluttering soul easily lost. Don't worry, you're probably fine. Probably. You reach into your pouch. There's a carved token in there, given to you by a seer 2 days ago. Made of boar tusk, with a crude wave scratched into one side and something that looks suspiciously like a screaming face on the other. You're not sure what it does, but you've rubbed it at least 20 times since leaving shore. Superstition? Obviously. Effective? Well, you haven't drowned yet. The wind shifts. Someone yells a command, and the sail is hoisted with a loud thwop. The billows catches, and suddenly you're no longer rowing. The ship lurches forward under wind power, and everyone cheers. The ritual blood has been given. The sea has accepted your presence. For now, as the boat glides, you watch one of the crewmen reach into his coat and pull out a tiny pouch. Inside is a scrap of red cloth, which he kisses and tucks beneath a board near the prow. You know what that is? His daughter's hair ribbon. He doesn't talk about her. No one asks, but the sea knows. Remember, these people weren't silly or primitive. They were gamblers. The sea was the biggest dice roll they ever took. So they did everything they could, rituals, offerings, charms, to tilt the odds in their favor. If it gave them even a chance at surviving a storm or avoiding a rock just beneath the surface, it was worth it. And sometimes the rituals weren't just for survival. Sometimes they were about return. There's an old belief that if you took something from your homeland, soil in a pouch, ash in a bone cup, it would pull you back over time, like a spiritual compass. Some men even tucked bits of moss under their tunics for this reason. Gross? Yes, but deeply comforting. The man beside you hums quietly, an old lullaby his grandmother taught him. The others don't join in, but they don't tell him to stop either. It's part of the rhythm now. The sea ahead is gray, calm for now, but never truly calm. You sit still, hands sticky from old wood and cold air, wondering what will be asked of you next, and what else the sea will demand before the voyage is over. The longship hums beneath you. Yes, hums. As if the planks have absorbed so many chants, footsteps, and silent prayers that they've developed a life of their own. You shift your weight slightly, and your boot knocks something under the deck. Sounds hollow. You glance around. No one else reacts. But you keep thinking about that sound like something is buried under the boards. Turns out that's not just your imagination. Before this very ship ever touched water, its bones were prepared, just like yours. Viking shipbuilders didn't just hammer planks and raise masts. They performed rituals. Sacred ones. Old ones. Especially when it came to laying the keel, the central beam that ran like a spine from bow to stern. It was common, though not universal, for objects to be placed beneath the keel at the very moment it was lowered into position. Sometimes bones, sometimes coins, and yes, sometimes human remains. Tiny ones, infant-sized. Calm down. Scholars still argue whether those were actual sacrifices or just old graves disturbed during construction. Either way, the superstition was strong. Bury something beneath the ship, and the vessel would know the earth. It would remember where it came from, and if it ever needed to find its way back, it could, with luck. Some called these offerings landbinders. Others whispered another name, keel ghosts. You shift again, slightly uneasy now, because you remember what the carpenter said before you boarded. How this ship has never lost a soul it didn't mean to. You laughed then. You're not laughing now. Here's the oddest thing. This superstition wasn't just Viking. Traces of it appear in Celtic, Slavic, and even Anglo-Saxon shipbuilding lore. Some theorists, usually the ones wearing wide-brimmed hats and smelling faintly of incense, claim this points to a shared pre-Indo-European belief that vessels needed a spirit to travel. And if you didn't give it one, it might just take yours. Even modern sailors in remote parts of northern Scandinavia used to place tokens beneath the mast of fishing boats. The practice lingered for centuries. Some say it never truly went away. If you visit certain docks today, you'll still find a quiet corner with burned candles, bits of bone, or sun-bleached driftwood tied with thread. Old habits die hard, especially on the water. You feel a sudden urge to check under your bench, just in case. As the day wears on, your ship cuts through low waves. Gulls follow. The wind holds. Everything is going suspiciously well. And that, of course, makes everyone nervous. Because in Viking superstition, too much good luck too early was a red flag. It was the sea trying to lull you. Let them lower their guard, it seemed to whisper. And then I'll take them all, which is why one of the crewmen does something odd after lunch. He spits into the sea 3 times. Then he taps the deck with his knuckles and mutters something under his breath. You lean over and whisper, "What was that for?" He shrugs. "To offend the sea a little. Just a little. That's the thing, you never want the sea to be bored." Aboard sea, they said, got hungry. So a mild insult now and then, a joke, a gesture, even a mock offering of rotted food, was seen as a healthy tension. You and the sea, locked in a dance of mutual suspicion. This is where the bones beneath the hull come back into play. See, if the ship already had a spirit, a restless one, it would keep the sea occupied, distracted, focused on that other soul. Not yours. Comforting thought, isn't it? You shift again, still humming under there. Here's a detail you might like. On some ceremonial ships, like those used in royal expeditions or religious journeys, builders would carve names into hidden parts of the vessel. Not the names of people, the names of things. Wolves, mountains, rivers, spirits. A kind of magical graffiti meant to confuse evil forces. Let them try to follow us, one sailor once said. If they can't even read our true shape, and if a ship broke apart in a storm, the builders weren't blamed. Not directly. Instead, People assumed the offering beneath the keel hadn't been enough. Maybe it wasn't sincere. Maybe the wrong bone was used. Or the landbinder was placed upside down. One mistake, and the whole voyage could unravel like a badly woven sail. You look at your crewmates again. You wonder who among them knows what lies under this deck. The captain? The builder? Or no one? There's a popular tale told among Viking children, still passed down in some coastal villages. It goes like this. A boy finds a piece of carved bone under the floorboards of a wrecked ship. It's shaped like a curled fish and has 3 scratches on it. One for sea, one for death, one for return. He pockets it and runs home. That night, the sea comes to his dreams, asks for it back. Polite at first, then less so. The moral? Don't steal from the dead, especially not from under a keel. You shake the thought away as the sun dips lower, casting bronze light across the waves. The ship creaks, like it's clearing its throat. The men begin checking the ropes. Someone peeks below to make sure no water's coming in. Just routine. But the nervous glances say otherwise. You close your eyes for a moment and picture the bone buried beneath you. Is it a seal bone? A deer's? Something older? Something more recent? Whatever it is, it's quiet now. That's all that matters. The sea doesn't whisper back, but it hasn't turned on you either. Yet. The wind is changing. You don't need a compass to tell. The shift lives in your bones, a subtle tingle that brushes down your spine, carried by a breeze that smells like cold iron and brine. It's the sort of wind that makes the crew glance upward, their hands tightening on the ropes with reflexive reverence. Because when the wind speaks, the Vikings listen, and so do you. Someone at the front of the ship murmurs, "NJRR is awake. Jord, god of the sea, the wind, and everything that floats between land and nowhere." You've heard his name whispered before, back on shore. But out here, it's never spoken loud. Not unless you're making an offering. The man with the single earlobe, remember him? Begins untying a small leather sack hanging from his belt. From it, he removes a dull coin, a piece of driftwood carved with waves, and a bit of dried seaweed wrapped in linen. He walks to the side of the boat and begins to chant in Old Norse. You don't understand all the words, but the rhythm feels ancient, like it came from the throat of the sea itself. Then he drops the offerings into the water. You follow suit. You dig into your own pouch. Nothing in there seems worthy, until your fingers close around a bead of amber, cloudy with a trapped insect that probably died before your grandfather's grandfather's grandfather was born. You hesitate, but something inside you says, "Give it." So you toss it into the waves, and the sea swallows it with barely a ripple. Vikings believed Njord could calm any storm or summon one on a whim. He didn't need temples. He had the ocean. Sailors claimed they could feel his favor or displeasure in the way the boat moved. A smooth glide? Favor. A jolt without a visible cause? You'd better start singing. And that's what starts now. A deep, breathy hum rolls from the center of the crew. One voice, then another layering over it. The song is old, wordless, but full of shape. It loops, lingers, repeats. It's not about melody, it's about rhythm. Like rowing, like breathing, like surviving. You hum too, quietly. At first, your pitch clashes awkwardly. Then, it folds in, becomes part of the ship's heartbeat. You're singing to Njord, but you're also singing to your own fear. That's how it works. Historians confirm that Njord was among the most beloved gods for Viking seafarers. Unlike Odin, always busy with his ravens and cryptic games, Or Thor, a bit too smashy, Njord was approachable, practical, fatherly. He wasn't interested in endless battle. He wanted safe landings, full nets, and smooth journeys. A good god for a long trip. Fringe theory time. Some scholars believe Njord was once a sea goddess in an older tradition, later rebranded as male during the consolidation of the Norse pantheon. Others suggest his worship may have evolved from ancient Baltic sea cults, blending human sacrifice and wind rituals. But no one agrees. You'd be surprised how many experts on Viking belief systems prefer arguing to sailing. A soft bell sounds. Actually, it's a bronze ring tied to a mast with horsehair, and the humming fades. The sail flutters slightly, and the ship adjusts course. The wind has truly arrived now, no longer teasing. It fills the canvas with a gentle firmness, like the breath of some giant creature stirring in its sleep. That's when you notice the small shrine. Near the stern, beneath a leather tarp, someone has built a little altar. It's easy to miss. No flashy gold or marble here, just 3 river stones, stacked. A fishbone, a feather, and a dab of red paint. Njord's face, if you squint, probably the work of the ship's Vitki, the spiritual advisor, part priest, part weather-guessing wizard, part licensed eccentric. You crouch near it, not too close, just looking. Suddenly, the old sailor appears beside you and nods. "Always keep him happy," he says, tapping the side of his nose, "and never promise him anything. He remembers." Turns out, Njord hated broken promises. If you vowed to sacrifice a goat upon safe return, and didn't, well, enjoy your next storm. Or don't. There's a story, told more than once across coastal villages, of a merchant who promised Njord a golden or if he returned rich from Ireland. The trip was smooth. He made a fortune, but he never paid up. On his next journey, his ship was found days later, upside down, floating without a single man aboard. The oar, still in his possession. Coincidence? Sure, but you don't really think so. You return to your seat, the wind still steady, the sail full. The ship feels content. Not happy, never that, but content. Like a cat lying in a sunbeam with one eye open, waiting to see if you'll do something stupid. Someone cracks a joke about Njord having smelly feet. A nod to the myth where his sea-loving lifestyle clashed hilariously with his mountain wife Scotty's cold preferences. You chuckle. The sea doesn't seem to mind. Then you notice the younger sailor near the bow tracing something into the deck with salt water. A symbol. It looks like a ship with wings, or maybe waves with teeth. You lean forward to ask about it, but he quickly rubs it away with his sleeve. "Don't name the wind," he says quietly. "Just thank it." You nod. Lesson learned. One more fact before the sun dips too far. The Vikings didn't just pray to Njord. They also negotiated. Before dangerous crossings, they'd toss a marked stone into the sea and wait for it to sink. If it vanished without a trace, good. If it bobbed back up, try again. Or better yet, don't sail that day. You think about your amber bead, now lying somewhere on the seafloor, watched over by fish and kelp and the occasional curious sea spirit. You hope it was enough, because the sea doesn't forget, and neither does Njord. The wind holds steady, and the ship slices through the water like a well-honed blade. You're finally in open sea. No more fjord cliffs watching over you. No comforting coastline just to turn away. It's just you, your crew, your ship, and the sea. A vast, heaving creature that doesn't care how tough you look in your iron helmet. But today the crew seems hopeful. they're passing something around. Not food, not drink, something more precious. A wind knot. It's a simple thing. 3 knots tied into a length of cord, usually made from horsehair or flax, sometimes dyed with crushed berries or stained with blood. To the untrained eye, it looks like a bit of fishing tackle. But here on this boat, it's as powerful as a god's whisper. You take it when it's handed to you, feeling the tension in the cord. The first knot is loose, the second, tighter, the third, practically fused. You've heard of this before, not magic. According to old seafaring lore, each knot holds a different strength of wind. Untie the first and you'll get a gentle breeze. The second, a good strong push. But the third, that one's for when you really need to move and don't care what gets destroyed along the way. Most Viking crews carried at least one wind knot charm, often purchased, never cheaply, from women known as veterbinders or weatherbinders. They were said to live along lonely coasts or cliffside villages, spinning the cords by moonlight, whispering into them, and sometimes even spitting into the knots for good measure. Because apparently even magic needs a little bit of bodily fluid. You're told this particular knot came from a woman who hadn't left her island in 40 years. She takes only 2 things as payment: a silver coin touched by thunder, or a song sung in 3 languages. No one knows how this crew paid her. You decide not to ask. The captain stores the cord in a pouch made from seal leather. He doesn't tie it to the mast. That would be too obvious. He wears it under his shirt, close to his chest. If you untie a knot too soon or at the wrong time, the sea might not appreciate the shortcut. Historians, of course, like to roll their eyes at wind knot stories. Folklore, they sniff. Superstition. But even modern maritime accounts record similar traditions among coastal communities in Iceland, the Shetlands, and northern Norway well into the 1800s. Some sailors swore by them. Others swore at them when the knots failed to work, which, according to the stories, only happened if you weren't polite to the windbinder. But here's a quirk you'll enjoy. Some knots weren't meant to be untied at all. They were just kept on board as protection against stealing winds. Yes, that was a thing. The idea was that rival ships, or worse, spirits, could steal your favorable wind and trap your vessel in stillness, like a floating curse. The knots kept that from happening. Think of them as magical padlocks on your weather. The crew once encountered a ship that had been dead in the water for 3 days. The sail hung limp, despite clear skies and friendly weather. The men on board looked pale and hollow-eyed. Their wind had been taken, or so they believed. Your crew passed them a small wind knot in exchange for a barrel of smoked fish. They were moving within the hour. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe someone on your boat just had better connections with the wind. There's a saying among the older sailors: you don't own the wind, you just rent it, and the price changes hourly. It's funny until the breeze dies and the sea turns to glass. Then you start digging through pouches for knots, whispering apologies to no one in particular. As the afternoon wears on, the sea begins to chop gently, and a few of the younger crew exchange nervous glances. The wind's still blowing, but the swells are building. A reminder that having too much wind is as dangerous as none. You see the captain quietly reach under his tunic, fingers brushing the knot cord. He doesn't untie it, just touches it, like a warning, or maybe a threat. Another fringe superstition kicks in. Don't whistle. Ever. Not on a Viking ship. Whistling was believed to summon winds you couldn't control, wild, reckless gales that knocked masts off and snapped rudders like dry twigs. One guy starts humming through his teeth and gets a death stare from 3 directions. He stops immediately. Unless you're a storm caller, someone mutters. You've heard of those men said to be born during lightning storms, who could command the wind by whistling. But no one wants to test that theory today. You notice a woman's braid tied to the base of the mast. It's old, weather-beaten, but clearly placed with care. Another charm, probably from someone's mother or lover. Hair was often used in wind charms, especially braided with nettle or rowan fibers. Hair held memory. Intention. It tangled with the wind in ways scholars can't quite explain, though several have tried, usually with charts, Latin footnotes, and yawns. One historian insists the knots were purely symbolic, a ritual meant to give sailors the illusion of control. But you've seen what happens when a knot is untied at the wrong moment. Once, a deckhand panicked in a lull and undid a second knot out of turn. Within minutes, a freak gust tore half the sail loose. Was it bad luck? Coincidence? Poor sail maintenance? Or maybe the wind was insulted. As night falls, the knots remain unbroken. The ship glides onward under its own grace, no magic needed for now. But you can't help glancing at the pouch where the wind lives, quietly tied and waiting. Because when the sea decides to test you, no sword, no chant, and no prayer will matter quite as much as a few loops of string and the promise whispered into them by a lonely woman on a cliff. And if you do have to use one, just hope it's the right knot. It begins with a sound. Not thunder, not wind. Something quieter. A creak of wood stretched too far. A slap of water with too much weight behind it. A breath long and low that doesn't belong to anyone on board. You look around. You're not the only one who heard it. The crew grows still as if by instinct. One man mutters, "Draugr." Another crosses himself. Not a Christian, but hedging his bets. You're about to ask what that word means, but you already know. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. Every Viking child grows up with them, told in half-whispers by firelight. Ghosts of the drowned. Sailors who died at sea but didn't stay dead. Their bodies lost, their souls sour. Now they drift with the tides, skin bloated, eyes black, hair floating like seaweed, reaching for ships that remind them of what they lost. Tonight, the water feels heavy, thicker somehow, as if something beneath it is listening again. A rope unspools too fast. A barrel shifts on its own. You hear the captain speak low to the helmsman. "No whistling, no laughing." Someone else adds, "And no looking overboard." You quickly find something to look at that is not the black water. This is the hour of sea spirits and monsters. Not just the Draugr, but older things, ancient things. One sailor swears he once saw the Hafgufa, a massive beast said to sleep beneath entire islands, breathing only once every few hours, mistaken for rocks until it opens its thousand-toothed mouth and swallows a ship whole. Sure, you tell yourself sounds fake, but tonight, it doesn't feel fake. Mainstream historians will tell you that Viking mythology is full of sea monsters. They're right. The Kraken, the Linormer, the Marminal, half-man, half-fish. But what they won't tell you is that most sailors didn't talk about these creatures on board. Mentioning them aloud was risky. It was like inviting them in, so the crew doesn't name them. Instead, they use nicknames. The long fins, the ones that rise, the eaters of anchors. You hear a young oarsman whisper, "Don't call them," and they won't answer. You pretend not to notice how pale he looks. Odd quirk. Some Vikings used carved monster heads on their prows not to frighten enemies, but to ward off sea spirits. Ever notice how the heads are often removed when entering harbor? That's why. The monsters were for the sea. You don't bring that kind of power into someone's village. It's like dragging a wolf into a nursery. The head on your ship is still intact, fanged and curling, with bone eyes and a forked tongue. Its jaw creaks as the ship sways, like it's whispering something. Maybe to you, maybe to whatever's swimming beside you. You peek over the edge of the longship, against your better judgment. Nothing. Then the water shimmers, just a little. A soft swirl. Probably a fish. Probably. That's when one of the older crew starts muttering a naming chant. Not to summon, but to identify. A low, rhythmic call to ward off sea beasts by reminding them who you are. Names in Viking lore were power. If something knew your true name, it could find you anywhere. But if you named it first, you might just control it. His chant goes like this: Son of Egil, breath of ash, born of pine, fed on storm, I sail with no fear. I name you nothing. The words settle like dust. The air feels a little lighter. The waves slow. Fringe fact: some Icelandic sagas describe sailors carving fake names onto driftwood and tossing it into the sea as decoys for spirits. A trick. If something must find me, they reasoned, let it find that instead. You consider writing your name on a leftover scrap of cloth and tossing it overboard. But you don't. Not yet. Someone tells a joke to break the tension. It's not funny, but everyone laughs anyway, loud, on purpose. It's part of the ritual. A noise loud enough to keep fear away. Spirits hate laughter. At least that's what you all hope. Then someone farts. The laughter turns real. There, that's better. The weight of the moment lifts a little. But still, no one looks overboard again. Not for the rest of the night. The Vikings weren't stupid. They knew the sea had rules. Even if they couldn't read them, you tuck yourself deeper into your cloak, eyes scanning the stars. They say the drogger can't climb aboard unless you speak to them first. So you keep your mouth shut just in case. One last scholarly note before the watch changes. Historians still debate whether Viking sailors genuinely believed in these creatures or used the stories to scare younger crew into obedience. The consensus? A bit of both. But every now and then, a half-sunken wreck washes ashore with claw marks where no claws should be. And suddenly, the old stories feel less like fiction and more like warning labels. You drift towards sleep with one eye open, the chant echoing in your ears, the monster head above you gnashing silently at the night. And beneath you, something swims. You wake to silence. Not calm. Silence. The kind of silence that doesn't belong on a ship. No creaking wood.
No murmured jokes.
No wind. Just the slow lapping of water against the hull. As if the sea is breathing shallow, annoyed, waiting. Dead calm. The sail hangs like wet cloth. The oars lie still, their blades slick with dew.
No gulls.
No fish jumping. No cloud cover. Just that pale gray dome of sky and the flat sheet of ocean below. It's as if the world has stopped spinning and is staring back at you, tapping its fingers. Welcome to the most feared moment in a Viking voyage. Not the storm, not the monsters, not even enemy ships. This stillness. Because when the sea stopped, something was wrong. Some of the men start whispering. One bites his knuckle. The youngest one starts rowing without being told, gently, nervously, as if trying to tickle the ocean back to life. The rest join in. Not fast, not coordinated. Just enough to move. You row too. Your arms ache after just a few strokes. Dead calm makes every movement feel heavier. like dragging the boat through syrup. And worse, it's hot, not blazing, just wrong. A stale, breathless heat that settles on your shoulders and stays there, like an unwanted hand. One of the older sailors spits overboard and mutters, "She's watching." He means the sea, of course, or maybe something older. This is when the rituals for still water begin. First, no swearing. That might offend the quietness, wake whatever's causing it. Second, no music.
No humming.
The gods of still water are jealous ones, easily riled by melody. A single wrong note and you might summon a breeze that doesn't care what it destroys, as long as it moves. Third, water tossing. One man carefully pours a ladle of water from the sea back into the sea. It's a symbolic gesture, a bribe almost, a polite way of saying, "We're guests here. Please, let us pass." Historians still argue whether this practice originated from Norse beliefs or older, Finno-Ugric customs. The gesture appears in ancient Sami traditions too, where water was seen as a conscious boundary between worlds. And here you are, stranded on the boundary itself. Someone begins preparing mirror charms. You watch as they pull out small, hand-polished metal discs, bronze, silver, or even obsidian in rare cases, tied with strings and feathers. The purpose? Reflect the sky back at itself. Create a false sun. Distract whatever spirit is holding the wind hostage. Sometimes, the Viki says quietly, the sea stares too hard at us, so we give it something to stare at. You hold one. It's cold despite the heat. A dent in its surface catches your eye and shows you a version of your face you don't quite recognize. Not creepy at all. You hand it back. Then, in the far corner of the ship, someone pulls out the final weapon. The wind rattle. A strange, clattering thing made of bones, shells, bits of wood, and bronze rings. It's shaken slowly, not rhythmically, just persistently. The belief unclogs the air, loosens the knots that hold the wind prisoner. Of all the rituals you've seen, this one feels the most desperate, the most hopeful, and honestly, the sound is kind of soothing, like a distant storm that forgot to arrive. Fringe belief. In some regions, it was thought that bored ghosts caused calm seas, dead sailors, trapped between realms, begging for attention. One old superstition claimed that if you ignored a calm too long, the ghosts would start whispering directly into your ears, encouraging mutiny, madness, anything to make noise. You start humming quietly despite the warnings, just to fill the space in your head. A crew member slaps the back of your hand. Right? No music. The Viki approaches the mast. He sprinkles salt in a wide circle and places a single fish skull in the center, nose pointed east. It's not explained. No one asks. That's how it works with shipboard magic. You don't question the recipe. You just eat the stew. A fun detail. Some Viking crews believed if a ship was caught in a windless stretch for more than 2 days, the youngest member had to be thrown overboard, not to die, but to swim a circle around the ship. The motion was believed to stir the sea's heart. Of course, it only worked if the swimmer didn't drown. And if he did, well, then the sea wasn't interested in your tricks. Thankfully, today is only day 1. Someone suggests cutting a small slice from the sail, just a corner, to let the sea taste the fabric. A bit like giving a dog a sock. The idea is debated, then shelved. It's too early for desperate. So you sit, and you wait, and as you stare across the mirror-flat sea, you think about the flip side of all this. Because when the wind does return, and it always does, it might not come back kindly. There's a legend about the North Southerner, a spirit said to sleep beneath the northern current. If you disturb her during calm seas, she wakes in a rage and sends a wind so fast, it strips the skin off men's faces before they can scream. You smile. Surely that's just a tale, right? Right? The wind rattle stops. The fish skull cracks. A breeze tickles your cheek. Someone whispers. She forgives. The sail stirs. Not much, but just enough. The wind returns like an old friend who never knocks, just walks in and makes himself comfortable. It doesn't howl, it doesn't rush. It creeps, playful and cool, teasing the edges of the sail, tugging at your hair, sliding between your fingers as if to say, "Still alive, are we?" The crew exhales. Not in relief exactly, Vikings don't do relief, but in recognition. The stillness has broken. The gods have turned their faces again. The sea has shifted. Now it's time to pay attention to the sky. Not the part with the sun. The other part. Because once the wind is moving, the sky begins to speak. Clouds in strange shapes. Birds flying too low. A sudden green haze on the horizon. You've stepped into the world of the weather readers. The ship's unofficial prophets, trained in nothing, trusted in everything. You sit beside one now. He's squinting at the clouds, lips moving silently, probably counting something. He holds up his fingers, one at a time. Wind speed, cloud type, number of seabirds seen before dawn, shape of the foam at the prow, direction of your last sneeze, or something close to that. Viking weather signs weren't based on charts or instruments. They were built from memory, myth, and the kind of superstition that's half pattern and half paranoia. But they worked, often enough. He points. See that? Hammer cloud. You look. A long, flat cloud stretches across the sky like a bruise. At the far end, a curl like the head of a warhammer. Thor's hammer, to be precise. According to legend, when such a shape appears, it means the weather will strike. Sudden, fierce, but short-lived. So the sail is trimmed. The ropes double-checked. The chickens... Well, if you had any left, now would be a good time to say goodbye. You think he's kidding. He's not. Mainstream historical sources confirm that Norse seafarers watched cloud formations obsessively. They had no barometers, no satellite feeds. What they had was the sky, and stories. For instance, striped clouds meant the gods were walking. Depending on the direction, that meant either war or calm, or an inconvenient drizzle. Rings around the sun or moon were warnings. Someone aboard had lied, and the sea would reveal it soon. Someone always lied. And then there were the birds. You spot a gull circling above, lazily flapping. A good sign. Birds close to the water meant land within reach. Unless they were land tricksters, birds sent by spirits to mimic normal patterns and lure ships toward wreckage. Fun. Someone tosses a crumb skyward. The gull ignores it. Everyone watches. No one comments. They noted it. That's how this works. Another man reaches into his pack and pulls out a weather stone. A chunk of quartz with tiny black flecks. He places it on the deck and waits. A few minutes later, he nods. Feels dry. What exactly that means? You're not sure, but he's satisfied. The stone returns to its pouch like a trusted oracle. Here's a quirky fringe belief for you. Some Viking sailors carried pieces of reindeer antler carved with weather runes, staves believed to sense changes in air pressure. The most common symbol? A spiral to catch the wind in miniature and teach it to behave. One crewmate pulls a carved amulet from under his shirt, a vegvisor, the so-called runic compass. though its popular image today is likely a 17th century Icelandic invention. Some scholars argue it may be inspired by older seafarer charms. He kisses it once, places it against the mast, and whispers, "Show us through the storm, not into it." You look up again. That hammer cloud has doubled in size. Here comes the test. The wind sharpens. The ship leans. You brace. The sail snaps tight like a drawn bow. The waves lift, not huge but angry. Choppy, the weather readers say. A word that sounds harmless until you realize it means the boat will start jumping like a panicked deer. Rain begins to mist, fine and horizontal, needle-like. You pull your cloak tighter. Someone slips. Someone else curses, immediately biting their tongue. No swearing during sky signs. Bad form. You squint through the wet, watching the Vicky smear a circle of black ash onto the mast. Lightning ward. Not magical enough to guarantee safety, but comforting enough to pretend. You join in, pressing your palm flat against the wood, whispering a phrase you barely understand. Let the sky burn, not us. As quickly as it began, the hammer cloud breaks. The wind steadies. The sea stops bucking like a child denied a treat. And then, a double rainbow. You hear the crew actually cheer. One even weeps, wiping his face with a salt-stained sleeve. Double rainbows, according to old Viking belief, meant that the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge to the realm of the gods, was open but watching, not taking anyone yet. A good omen. You're seen but not summoned. Here's a last odd detail. In certain coastal communities, some sailors believed that if a rainbow touched the mast, it meant your soul had already died, and the rest of you was just catching up. So when a faint streak of color bends near your ship, everyone leans away from it, just in case. The rain fades, the clouds scatter, the sea gleams like polished steel. The boat rights itself. No one says, "That was close." But the silence is thick with that exact meaning. And you smile for just a second. Not because it's over, but because out here nothing ever really is. You lose track of time. Out here, the hours melt together like candle wax. There's no clock, no schedule, just the rhythm of the sea and the rituals that frame it. Morning prayers, noon meals, midnight watches. You begin to measure time not by the sun, but by the rituals of luck that dot the day like stepping stones through chaos. And there are many. Take the morning touch. As the first light spills across the sea, every crew member reaches out to touch the same object. A smooth stone embedded near the mast, blackened with years of fingers. No one remembers who placed it there. No one dares remove it. The belief, start the day with contact and the ship stays whole. Miss it, and well, you may as well start paddling back with your helmet. It's your third morning aboard. You touch the stone. It's warm already, somehow. Next comes the quiet oath. Each man speaks softly, something he won't do that day. I won't complain about the food. I won't fall asleep on watch. I won't look at the stars too long. It's not about promises. It's about keeping the sea uninterested. If you talk too loudly about your intentions, the sea might decide to challenge them. You whisper, "I won't think about drowning. Good luck with that." You learn quickly that Viking sailors had dozens of luck-layering habits. Small gestures stacked like shields against the unknown. Most aren't written down. They live in the fingertips, in breath, in muttered half-prayers. Some have no known origin. Others can be traced all the way back to ancient Germanic or even Proto-Nordic traditions. A favorite one? The turning of the blade. Before eating, before sleeping, before battle, each man twists his knife once in his belt, so the blade faces outward. Symbolically, it cuts the thread of bad fate from the day before. Doesn't hurt that it also makes you ready to stab anything that climbs over the rail. Fringe fact: some Icelandic texts refer to this as fate slicing, and claim it originated from a tale in which a warrior avoided drowning by stabbing the sea itself. Whether that's poetic or just weirdly violent water therapy is still debated. You notice one sailor tying his left shoe first every time. Another knocks the side of the boat with 2 fingers before drinking. And no one sits on the prow unless they've been invited by someone older. Why? You don't sit in the eye of the ship unless you're ready to be seen. Seen by what? No one answers. Midday brings another ritual, the laugh meal. It's not about the food, it's about the sound. Once per day, the crew must eat together and laugh. Even if nothing is funny, especially then. It keeps the long shadows away. These aren't metaphorical shadows. You've heard the term whispered whenever someone starts talking in his sleep, or staring too long at the wake, or mumbling into his beard when no one's around. He's got a shadow clinging, someone says. Don't let it spread. Laughter apparently is a disinfectant. You force a chuckle over your cold fish. Feels fake, but it works. The man beside you slaps your back like you've just slain a bear. A small but crucial ritual appears around sunset. Fire tracing. Someone lights a tiny flame in a covered dish, just a flicker, and passes it around. Each person runs a finger through the flame. Not enough to burn, just to catch the warmth. It's a gesture of continuity, of claiming light while there's still light left. If anyone refuses, you throw them overboard. Kidding. Mostly. Historians still argue whether these little acts were truly spiritual or just social glue. Were they part of an organized system of belief, or simply deeply held habits that helped men cope with fear? You watch the seriousness in each man's eyes as he touches the flame. You decide it doesn't matter. Some modern scholars call this folk psychology, the idea that collective rituals regulate stress during high-risk activity. Sailors, soldiers, firewalkers, and Viking longship crews, especially Viking longship crews. Back to the ship. As night sets in, the rituals shift from gestures to words. One of the oldest men recites a passage from memory. Not a prayer, a warning. He speaks of the narrow places between winds, where unlucky ships drift for years, their crews whispering, forgetting, becoming something else. Everyone listens. No one speaks. When he finishes, he draws a luck stave on the deck with a piece of charred bone. Just a circle with 3 points. Looks meaningless. Feels anything but. He taps it 3 times and wipes it away. Luck doesn't like being stared at. You nod. You don't know why. Here's a curious one. If a gull lands on the ship after sunset, it must be greeted as a guest, with food, or a poem, or a respectful nod. Gulls are seen as messengers. Ignore one, and the message may never reach its sender, and the sender, insulted, may come in person. You hope that never happens. No gulls tonight, just stars, and cold. You lie back, head against the coiled ropes, and try not to think too hard about tomorrow, or the day after, or where the rituals end and the real dangers begin. You just try to breathe, touch the stone, turn the blade, keep the flame, laugh once a day, and never ask if it's working, because if you ask, you'll find out. The stars are still above you, sharp, cold points in the velvet dark, stitched into the night like runes from a forgotten god. You've never seen them this clear before. No torchlight, no city smoke. Just the raw sky, wide and ancient, the way the Vikings saw it when everything they had was riding on wind and wood. And you're learning now this sky isn't just for admiration. It's for navigation. Because while the sun might rise and set like clockwork, it's the stars that truly matter when you're deep in open sea, where the water stretches forever and every direction looks the same. And the Vikings? They read stars the way you read signs on a road trip, except if you miss your exit out here, you don't end up in the wrong town. You end up dead. Tonight, the navigator sits cross-legged near the prow, arms wrapped around his knees. His eyes never leave the sky. His lips move slowly, naming stars, counting pulses between their rise and fall, using no compass, no sextant, just memory, rhythm, and the soft flecks of wave and hull. You shuffle closer. He points up to a faint star sitting like a nail in the north. Lidars Jarna, he murmurs, the leading star, what we now call Polaris, the North Star. To the Vikings, it was the anchor of the sky. Always steady, always north. Follow it and you were never lost. Well, almost never, because as you quickly discover, the Norse didn't just navigate with Polaris. That was only the beginning. They used star pairs, twin stars that rose and set together. They tracked the sunstone, a mysterious crystal that, allegedly, could locate the sun even on cloudy days. Sounds made up, right? But in 2013, researchers actually demonstrated how Iceland's spar could polarize light and detect the sun's direction under overcast skies. You're now imagining a Viking sailor squinting at the clouds, holding up a translucent rock, muttering, "Aha!" while his crewmates politely pretend it makes sense. A quirky detail. Some believe the sunstone had to be fed light during the day, left out to charge like some mystical solar battery. If you kept it covered too long, it forgot how to shine. And let's not forget the ravens. Yes, ravens. According to saga and speculation alike, some captains would bring caged ravens aboard. When the ship seemed truly lost, a bird was released. If it circled and returned, no land nearby. If it flew straight and vanished, follow it. Today, you don't have ravens, but someone has drawn a bird into the deck planks with chalky ash. Facing west. Just a reminder, just in case. There's a certain rhythm to star navigation, breathing, counting, whispering star names like prayers. The navigator marks time with stones moved between his fingers. For pulses for one star pair, 6 for another. It's not math, it's feel. Historians agree that the Vikings weren't just rough warriors. They were among the best navigators of their age. Long before compasses made their way to Europe, the Norse were using wave patterns, sun position, and star drift to find Ireland, Iceland, Greenland, even North America. Leifur Eiríksson didn't discover Vinland by accident. He had people who knew. Fringe theory. Some believe the Vikings inherited their sea navigation skills from a lost seafaring culture that predates even them. A shadow civilization whose knowledge was passed down only through oral memory and instinctive ritual. No proof, of course, but it does make you wonder where some of these uncannily correct instincts came from. Back to the stars. Another sailor joins the navigator and starts humming. A deep, slow drone, almost like a lullaby. You realize it's time to the sky, a kind of celestial metronome. The rest of the crew begins to quiet again. The ship is adrift in sound and light, not needing direction right now, only assurance. You look back up. You can't name the stars, but they feel familiar now. You spot the W shape of Cassiopeia, though the Vikings probably saw it as Freya's comb, dropped into the heavens to remind her children to keep looking up. There's one more tool in the night navigator's kit, the smell of the sea. Seriously, different regions, currents, and temperatures have different scents. The air off the coast of England doesn't smell like Iceland. A good navigator could tell you where you were by breathing through his nose and licking the back of his hand. You try it now. Salty, slightly fishy, a bit like wet rope. You decide not to guess where you are. The stars begin to shift, not in a cosmic sense, but in your perspective of them. The boat angles slightly. A new constellation rises. The navigator nods. You're on course. And just as you're starting to feel the night become friendly, the Vicky appears again, cloak flapping like a tired bat, and says, "Don't watch the stars too long. They might start watching back." Right? Of course. Because even the stars can't just be stars out here. They have opinions, egos, rituals. You lie back anyway. One last open debate among historians. Did Viking navigators actually use maps? Maybe, but none have survived, and some argue they never existed. That the stars, sunstones, and ravens were the maps, and the true map lived only in memory, voice, and experience. You're beginning to believe it, because out here, where the ocean never ends and the sky never lies, you don't read maps. You remember them. At some point, maybe near dawn, maybe a little after, you realize something has changed. The sea's rhythm hasn't stopped. The sky is still wide and endless. The stars have begun to fade. But beneath all of it, there's a smell. It sneaks up on you, subtle but undeniable. A hint of rot, dampness, and something metallic, like old iron or blood rubbed into rope. Not strong. Not immediate, but wrong. You sit up. So does everyone else. No one speaks, but all noses twitch the same way. The Vicky's already on his feet, holding a clump of dried moss to his face, muttering a chant that includes the word skug or shadow. Someone tosses salt overboard. The navigator makes a fist and knocks the mast twice. And someone finally says it. Whale road ghosts. You thought sea spirits were unsettling. This is worse, because these aren't spirits of the sea. These are the ones who used to sail it. Vikings who died badly, violently, or in betrayal, or simply without the proper burial rites. Their souls trapped in the water's memory, unable to move on. Unlike the Draugr, these ghosts don't seek flesh. They seek remembrance, and if they don't get it, they whisper. The crew begins preparing a ritual that is, frankly, a little unsettling. First, a bowl of seawater is passed around. Each sailor dips their fingers in and flicks 3 droplets over their left shoulder. The belief, a sign of respect, like knocking on a grave. You flick. The water's cold and sticky, like it's been waiting. Next, the naming of the forgotten. A chant begins, low, slow, rhythmic. Each name called out was once a Viking sailor. Jorund, Halfdan, Torvi, Eirik, Svala. Dozens, maybe hundreds. No one writes them down. They're passed mouth to mouth, generation to generation. Some are real. Some are invented. It doesn't matter. The point is to give the ghosts names again, because the dead grow restless when they're forgotten. Mainstream historians might scoff at this part. There's no documented evidence, they say. No sources confirm such chants. But ask a sailor who's woken to whispering on the wind at midnight, and he'll tell you. Sources don't matter when the air starts breathing your name. Now comes the strangest step, the boat reversal. Not a physical turnaround, just symbolic. The prow is marked with a line of black pitch, smudged to appear as an eye closing. The idea? The boat must not see the ghosts as it passes through their territory. to avoid confrontation, to make itself a vessel of memory, not challenge. You quietly wonder how many times this crew has done this before. Another sailor hangs a strip of linen from the mast. It flaps lazily in the breeze, like a tongue or a flag. It's called the wind shroud. According to fringe beliefs, it's meant to catch any lingering soul who wishes to be remembered. If the fabric tightens suddenly, that means someone took the offer. You try not to stare at it too long. A little-known fact: some runestones in Sweden include maritime epitaphs, not just for the fallen warriors, but for lost ships, as if even the vessel had a soul worth honoring. Vikings believed memory was currency in the afterlife. If no one remembered you, your soul withered. So ships, names, even battle cries were preserved like songs. The Viki begins drawing spirals on the deck in chalk. You've seen spirals before, but this time they move inward, not out. Calling spirals, he says, just in case they have something to say. He places a lump of pitch in the center and sets it alight. You expect howling. You get silence. And then the ship groans. Just once. A long, aching sigh. Could be wood swelling from the salt. Could be rope tightening in the morning dew. Or it could be something stepping aboard. No one moves. Even the oars rest still in their loops. The flame on the deck flickers once. The shroud tugs slightly, just a snap, and then lies still. You hear a voice say, "He forgives." You don't know who said it. And you're not the only one pretending not to notice. Eventually, the ritual winds down. The spirals are smudged out. The water bowl is dumped back into the sea with a whispered tack. The wind picks up again. Not much, just enough to let the sails breathe. The Viki lights a bit of birch bark and wafts the smoke across the ship. "Clean air," he murmurs. You inhale deeply. It smells like home, even if you're not sure where home is anymore. You'd think the ghosts were gone, but that's not how it works. Viking belief held that spirits lingered, not forever, but long enough, just until they felt heard. And so the ritual ends not with a banishment, but a blessing. The last crew member tosses a coin into the water and says, "Sail well, even now." You feel a little less alone after that. Maybe ghosts aren't always something to fear. Maybe, like you, they're just trying to find their way back. You smell land before you see it. The scent hits like a wave of pine, resin, and earth, of moss and stone warmed by morning sun. It coils through your nostrils, ancient and raw, dragging something deep from your memory, even if you've never stepped foot there before. After days, or was it weeks? On open sea, that smell is more than air. It's a promise. But hold your excitement, because this is the part the old sailors warn about: the landfall rituals. You don't just arrive at land in Viking tradition. You negotiate your return to soil like you're walking into someone else's hall. You knock. You wait. You prove you're not cursed, hunted, or carrying spirits. You ask the land's permission to set foot on it. And if you skip this step, let's just say there are more ways to die on shore than at sea, and not all of them leave marks. The ritual begins with a gesture so simple it barely feels magical. A pause. The ship slows. Oars lift. Sail loosens. No one speaks. For one long breath, the vessel floats, silent and reverent, on the edge of arrival. Then one man throws a stone, just a small one, smooth and pale, arcing through the air into the shallows. Splash. You ask what it means. First voice. Someone mutters, "Let the land hear a stone before it hears a man." Fringe fact. Some sagas describe chieftains refusing to make landfall until a welcome sound was heard, usually a bird call, a falling rock, or a splash that echoed just right. Historians still debate whether this was spiritual or just paranoia dressed in poetry. Either way, the stone always goes first. The Viking now moves to the prow and raises a bundle of herbs, juniper, birch, and a twist of dried seaweed. He lights it, letting the smoke curl up and over the dragon head of the longship. This isn't for sea gods now. It's for land spirits. The Norse believed every place had its own consciousness. A forest had moods. A mountain remembered grudges. And shores? Shores were fickle. They welcomed one crew, wrecked the next. So the offering is made not out of fear, but courtesy. Give us passage, the Viki says. Then another unusual gesture, the foot sweep. One sailor unties his sandal and brushes his bare foot in a circle on the deck. Then he takes a pinch of earth, carried in a pouch from home, and sprinkles it into the sea. The idea? Bridge soil to soil. Let the land you're about to walk on know you've come from somewhere respectful. You're not a rootless spirit. You have origin, identity. It's poetic and strangely practical. Because let's face it, arriving in a new land in full armor and ready to raid is one way to make an impression. But so is arriving cloaked in ritual, humble but unbroken. The Vikings did both, often within the same afternoon. Another lesser-known tradition, the anchor chant. It's not about anchoring the ship, it's about anchoring your luck. One voice, usually the youngest, chants a line while the anchor drops. You're the youngest today. Lucky you. You clear your throat. Let us hold fast, but not stay. Simple. The others nod. That works. Then the blood mark. Relax. It's not as bad as it sounds. A drop. Just one. Usually from the thumb, smeared across a wooden disc nailed near the mast. It's not about sacrifice. It's about exchange. A way to say, I give a bit of me so the land knows what it's receiving. You offer yours willingly. It's barely a sting. But as you watch it soak into the wood, you realize you've left part of yourself on this ship. And if you don't return, this blood will remember you. There's a quiet practicality to all this. Modern historians now believe these landfall rituals served as both spiritual acts and subtle checks against illness, bad morale, or hidden tension on board. If someone refused to participate, that raised questions. Were they cursed? Hiding something? Bringing doom? And if the ritual went wrong, say the stone sank too fast or the smoke blew back toward the ship, that was a sign. Some captains would sail on. Others would postpone landing altogether. The land is not in a talking mood, they'd say. Today, everything's gone smoothly. Almost. The welcome bird hasn't arrived. Traditionally, one bird must be seen before full disembarkation. Any bird, a gull, a raven, even a sparrow. It was the god's way of speaking through feather and wing. Until then, no one steps ashore. So you wait, and wait. A sailor pulls out a carved wooden bird from his pouch, obviously hand-whittled, wings curled like a child's drawing. Just in case, he jokes. But no one laughs. Too early. Then there, a shape in the sky, pale wings, low flight, a gull. Everyone exhales. Permission granted. You gather your things. Not much. Just your cloak, a worn talisman, your knife turned blade out like always. You step to the edge of the boat. And now comes the final gesture, the first foot forward. The oldest crew member chooses who steps onto the land first. It's not about status. It's about energy. Who's got the right luck weight today? Today, that's you. You step forward. The water kisses your ankles. The shore crunches underfoot. Shells, sand, and ancient stone. You've made landfall, and the land has accepted you, or so you hope. Your first night on land should feel like a victory. Solid ground, fresh air thick with pine and earth, a fire flickering in the center of a ring of tired, living men. But it doesn't feel safe. Not exactly, because the rituals don't stop once you reach land. If anything, they multiply. You've swapped the moods of the sea for the moods of the soil. And in Viking tradition, soil is just as temperamental, sometimes more. Because now you're not dealing with just the gods and the weather. Now you've stepped into someone else's territory. The land spirits, the hidden folk, the ancestors, the forest watching things that don't have names, only shapes. So the fire must be made correctly. Not just any flame. A three-way fire, fed first by driftwood, then landwood, then fat. Sea, earth, life. That's the sequence. If you mess it up, you risk calling the wrong kind of attention. Tonight's fire begins with sea-smooth timber from the ship's reserve, then pine from the forest edge, chopped by someone who whispered, "Thank you," to the tree before cutting. Lastly, a sliver of animal fat from the rations. Sizzles, hisses, then burns clean. The Vitki nods. Fire's good. You sit close, but not too close. The space around the fire must remain asymmetrical, no perfect circle. Viking belief held that symmetry draws spirits to investigate. A slightly misshapen group? That's harder to track, harder to bind. And then, before anyone eats, comes the first meal right. The rule is simple. Share the food with the earth. Not symbolically, literally. A piece of bread is placed in a bark bowl and buried just past the firelight. A slice of fish is tossed into the nearby stream. A drink, usually mead or ale, is spilled on a stone. Only then does anyone eat. You ask what happens if you forget. The reply, "You won't forget next time." That's comforting. Some fringe folklore claims these offerings were once far more elaborate. Small figurines carved from bone, etched with runes and wrapped in cloth, buried in clusters under trees to honor the landvetter, the land spirits. Icelandic law even demanded that approaching ships hide their dragon heads near shore to avoid frightening these beings. You remember the carved head of your longship was covered before landing. Now you understand why. After dinner comes the watching hour. Not a guard duty, more like a test. Each crew member must take a turn sitting alone at the edge of the firelight. Not to look outward, but inward. You sit just far enough that the shadows seem thicker, the woods deeper. You listen, you wait, you see what watches you. It's supposed to show the land who you are. It mostly shows how fast your imagination works when you're sleep-deprived and half full of dried cod. Historians debate whether this tradition, found in multiple sagas, was a form of meditation, initiation, or just psychological preparation for raiding. Some say it helped warriors steel themselves before violence. Others say it was a peace offering to the world they were about to disturb. Either way, you sit. You breathe, you listen, and the land listens back. Somewhere, an owl hoots. Everyone relaxes slightly. That's a good sign. Not all sounds are good, though. If a fox cries out, or a raven cackles 3 times near camp, the ritual must start again. Everyone must reoffer. You're relieved when neither happens tonight. Now sleep approaches. But even sleep requires boundaries. No one sleeps facing north. That's the direction of the dead. One sailor forgets and is nudged hard until he turns. Sleeping on your side is preferred, with your knife under your hand, edge turned inward. Dream spirits, it's believed, can't cross-metal, but you still don't want to greet them aggressively. Each bedroll is circled with charcoal dust.
À porte-à-blouarde.
Not flashy, not perfect, but it's something. You settle into your own space, tug your cloak around you, and stare at the fire's last flickers. And just before your eyes close, you hear a final ritual begin. The sleep recitation. One voice, reciting the known names of safe places. It's not a story, not quite a prayer, just a list. Riek Jadaler, Uppsala, Koppang, Lofoten, more. Each name is spoken slowly. It's meant to anchor your dreams, to tie your wandering soul to places of memory, not nightmare. A strange footnote from a 10th century fragment suggests that sailors who failed to hear this recitation were more likely to dream of drowning. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the mind listens harder when the body's asleep. The list goes on. Jorvik, Hedeby, Skara, Miklagard. You add one quietly under your breath. Place you miss. A name only you remember. And then you sleep. Not deeply, not perfectly, but with fewer shadows. Because tonight the land knows you. And, for now, it's willing to let you stay. You wake before the others. Not because you're brave or wise or used to Viking sleep conditions, but because something is singing. Not a person, not a bird, the land. A low hum, just at the edge of hearing, rises and falls in the early mist. Maybe it's wind through grass. Maybe it's distant river rush. But something inside you knows, this is the part of the ritual that no one controls. The part that just happens if you're lucky enough to hear it. You sit up slowly. The coals of the fire are cold now, gray and soft like old teeth. The camp is still. The others breathe heavy in their sleep, wrapped in their woolen cloaks and runic-patterned layers. Someone's snoring. It almost ruins the mood. Almost. But that hum continues. So you rise. Not with purpose, not yet. More like you're pulled by curiosity, by instinct, by the sense that the ritual isn't finished. Because no matter what they say, Viking landfall was never just about survival or superstition. It was about connection. And that connection had to be tested. You walk toward the tree line. Now comes what the sagas call the daybreak walk. It's not officially required. It's not assigned. But if someone wakes first, and someone always does, they walk. Quietly, thoughtfully, into the new land. Just a little. Just enough to be seen by it. To see it in return. You push past brambles, feet wet with dew, and step into the hush of morning trees. Everything feels suspended. The forest isn't threatening. It's simply watching. This is where many fringe rituals happen. Some sailors collect stones if the land allows it. Others braid grasses into little knots and hang them on low branches. Offerings to the Huldafolk, the hidden folk believed to dwell in rocks and hills. Icelanders still hold these beliefs today. Construction projects are halted if they're thought to disturb an elf stone. Who are you to laugh? You pick up a smooth pebble. It's oddly warm. You set it down again. Not today. The marking ritual comes next. Every Viking crew, upon successful landfall, leaves a sign. Something subtle. Not a flag or declaration. Just a trace. A rune carved into bark. A notch in a tree. A rock stack 3 stones high, never 4. The 4th draws too much attention. You spot the Viki ahead of you, kneeling by a stream. He doesn't flinch when you approach. He knows you'd come. This is how it always plays out. He hands you a tiny pouch. Inside, charred bone, sand from your landing site. You know what to do. You find a patch of open ground. Clear, untouched. You press your fingers into the pouch, draw a spiral onto the dirt. Outward, not in. You whisper a phrase you've heard twice but never understood. Go where I go, stay where I stay. It's not for protection. It's for anchoring. So if you die here, the land will know who you were. Because this isn't raiding territory. Not yet. This is still sacred ground. As you turn to leave, the Viking murmurs, "Don't look back." You don't ask why. You just obey. It's the final moment of the walk. The return without turning. If you glance over your shoulder, it's said that something might follow you back. Something curious, or hungry, or unfinished. Better not to invite that sort of attention. You re-enter camp just as the others begin to stir. Bread is broken, water fetched, faces washed with handfuls of cold stream. The quiet camaraderie of morning tasks settles in. Then comes the land claim, but not the kind you're expecting. No flags, no stakes, no shouting at the horizon. Just a circle of men and women, standing in silence, each holding something. A stone, a coin, a blade, a feather. One by one, they place their object on the ground. Claim, yes, but not of ownership, of presence. Vikings didn't believe you owned land. You asked to use it. You earned the right to remain. And these offerings say, I am here. I mean no harm, but I will defend myself if I must. Modern scholars often overlook this part of Viking life. The image of the axe-swinging raider has buried the subtler truths, rituals of respect, rhythms of settlement, and the dance between force and reverence. But the land remembers, and maybe that's why so many Viking settlements lasted. You drop your own token, a small carved piece of driftwood, shaped like an eye. Someone nods. Good choice. And now, you wait. For what? The confirmation sign. In most places, it's something natural. A sudden gust of wind, a bird call, the shift of sunlight through trees. Something subtle but clear. Until that moment arrives, no one builds. No one cuts trees. No one even sharpens a blade. This time, it comes in the form of a butterfly. Golden, fragile, impossible. It flutters through the circle, lands on a dropped feather, then takes off again. Everyone exhales. The land has spoken. The Vikings will stay for now. The land has accepted you. That doesn't mean it likes you. Just that, for now, it's willing to tolerate your presence. And as any seasoned Viking will tell you, tolerance is more than enough to build a home on, or at least a temporary camp, because the work begins fast. Axes bite into trees. Ropes are stretched between trunks. Shelters rise like the ribs of some slumbering beast, covered with hide and moss. Everyone moves with quiet purpose, not frantic, not idle. The mood feels somewhere between reverence and necessity. Like you're trying to avoid waking something or apologizing to it in advance. But even in the midst of all this building, rituals continue. In fact, construction comes with its own rituals, its own set of invisible blueprints. Rules passed from generation to generation by gesture, habit, and superstition more than instruction. You help dig a trench for a storage pit. Before the first spade hits soil, one of the older men sprinkles crushed eggshells into the hole. Keeps the underthings out, he mutters. You don't ask what underthings are. You've learned not to. Every post, every beam, must be marked before it's set. You watch as charcoal runes are drawn quickly, just above the point where each log will be buried. Some are familiar, algies for protection, iwas for strength. Others are abstract, local, even improvised. Personal charms against rot, infestation, or worse. Historians are still debating whether these construction runes were part of any formal system. There's no unified source.
No consistent spelling.
But they appear again and again in ship timbers, burial sites, even the foundations of old Scandinavian churches. Some call them work glyphs, others mutter marks. Either way, they're everywhere. You're handed a piece of chalk and told to draw one of your own. So you do. It's lopsided. It looks like a fish. Someone nods anyway. Good enough. Means it's yours. Even the act of placing stones for a hearth is done with care. The first stone must be warm. If it's cold to the touch, it's rejected. Why? Because a cold stone remembers too much. You try not to think about what that means. You find a stone that's sun-warmed, press your palm to it, and place it down. A woman nearby chants a foundation blessing as she weaves straw into the roof. Let no storm stir what roots have claimed. Let no frost find a path through bone. It's not a poem. Not exactly. It's more like a working spell. A phrase repeated until the hands remember it better than the tongue. Meanwhile, someone is preparing the threshold right. This one matters more than anything, because the threshold, the entrance to your shelter, is the line between what's yours and what's everything else. And Vikings believed that line had to be clearly marked, spiritually as well as physically. So they bury a token under it. Tradition varies here. Some crews use coins, others bits of iron. Sometimes it's something deeply personal, a tooth, a broken blade, even a lock of hair. You've heard the stories. The darker ones say that long ago some used blood, human specifically, but those are old tales. You hope. Today it's a coin, simple, copper, scratched by years of use. It goes under the threshold, wrapped in birch bark and bound with thread. Let this mark our boundary, the VIKING intones, not against others, but against the forgetting. That line hits you harder than expected. You realize most of these rituals aren't just about gods or spirits. They're about memory, about refusing to let this place, this moment, this tiny corner of the world fade into silence. Even fire gets its own ritual, now that it's no longer just survival but part of daily life. The camp's first cooking flame is lit not from a spark, but from the ember of the original travel flame, the one carried across sea in a closed bowl. It's a small detail, easy to miss, but to the Vikings it's crucial, because that ember is continuity. The same fire that warmed them on the ocean now heats the stew. And by preserving that ember, they tell the land, we did not come from nowhere. We carry our story with us. Modern archaeologists have found charred remnants of such embers, stored in tight clay pots, among Viking settlements. It's easy to miss in the dirt, but sometimes what you carry unbroken matters more than what you build. As twilight creeps in, one final ritual begins. Naming the camp. You don't get to choose your name. Not really. The place tells you. Someone steps to the center of the cleared ground and waits. The rest gather. No fire this time. Just stillness. Listening. Feeling. Then a word is spoken. It might be a sound, a phrase, an animal, a memory. Whatever emerges, that becomes the name of the camp. It's not formal, not carved into banners, but it's whispered every time someone leaves or returns. Tonight, it's Grasker, Grasscore. Someone dreamed of a field of green with stone in its heart. Someone else felt the ground tremble like a drum. The name fits. You whisper it once to yourself. Grasker. It already sounds like a place that matters. The shelters are done. The boundaries drawn. The fires lit. And beneath it all, the land is still humming low and steady. You lie back, staring up at the stars, and realize this isn't just a camp. It's a claim of presence in a world that forgets fast. And the rituals are what make it real. Night falls again, but it's a different night now. No longer the star-drenched, ocean-heaving night of a ship adrift. This one smells of smoke and soil, pine needles and damp moss. It wraps around you like an old fur cloak, warm but heavy, humming with the knowledge that you've stayed, which means you've passed the final, quietest trial of the Viking world. Settling in. But settling doesn't mean peace. Not really. It means the rituals change. You've moved from the ceremonial to the everyday, where superstition isn't dramatic, just constant. Small habits, tiny gestures, repeated whispers, like the ritual of stepping out of camp. Every time you leave the boundary, marked earlier with those charcoal wards and bone charms, you tap the wooden lintel above the entrance and whisper your name. It's not about claiming space. It's about reminding the land you're human, not a shadow returning to the forest. Shadows don't introduce themselves. You do. You forget once, just once, and you trip over a root you swear wasn't there before. Coincidence? Maybe. The others just raise their brows. Say your name next time. Then there's the rule of first sounds. Every morning, the first spoken words must be soft, preferably a greeting. Loudness at dawn is said to stir the old things. You hear one grizzled sailor mumble, "Good morning, little tree," to a bent sapling outside his hut. He swears it curls closer by noon. Even meals have rhythms now. Food is shared in silence for the first few bites, in case the spirits of the land want to listen in. No laughter, no toasts, not until the bread is broken and the stew swallowed. Then, only then, can stories begin. Tonight's story is an old one, told by a scarred woman with a cracked voice and eyes that seem to focus beyond the fire. She speaks of a place once called Skjoldheimer, home of shields, a coastal camp swallowed by forest. Not attacked, not abandoned, just gone. Only the fire pits remained, still warm. No one jokes afterward, and that's part of the ritual too. Story as warning, passed through generations, like invisible signs carved in bone. Not to frighten, but to instruct. You wonder how many of these rituals are just survival guides with dramatic flair. Probably most of them. But out here, where the dark feels thick enough to bite, even the most mundane habits start to feel like armor. Take the sleep circle, for example. You and the others don't just throw down bedrolls. You form a shape, heads in, feet out, one central flame. The Viki calls it closing the eye. Vikings believe the night watched them, and if they watched back, together evenly, the darkness blinked first. Tonight, someone falls asleep too far outside the circle. He's nudged awake and pulled back in before anyone says a word. Then there's the ember toss, a strange little act performed just before sleep. One coal from the fire is scooped out, placed in a bowl, and carried to the edge of camp, then tossed into a stream or buried under leaves. Why? To share the warmth, they say. More likely, to feed something you don't want hungry. One fringe theory suggests this act was meant to appease the watchers, spirits not of land or sea, but of in-between places. Shadows of forgotten gods who never got temples, only campfires. No one says this aloud, but they all do it. And finally, as the camp settles, comes the night call. Not a shout, not a signal, just a slow, collective hum, each voice different, yet blending. It's not musical, not beautiful, but it is comforting. The Vicky calls it reminding the air that you're still breathing. And with that, the fire dies down. The voices quiet. The camp sinks into hush. Only the forest breathes now, low and slow, like an animal that's learned to tolerate your scent. You lie there, staring at the wooden ribs of your shelter, and you realize something. You've changed. You are not who you were when you first stepped on that ship. You carry rituals now, habits shaped not by fear, but respect. You've whispered to stars, bargained with ghosts, tapped wood, tasted salt, burned herbs, buried coins, drawn spirals. You've become part of the pattern. And whether you leave tomorrow or never again, the pattern will remember you. The wind shifts. The smoke curls like a ribbon toward the sky. Somewhere an owl calls. Somewhere else, a stream chuckles over stones that weren't there yesterday. You close your eyes. The world holds you, and you sleep. The fire's out now. Just the faintest glow where the coals used to burn, warm against the cool hush of night. You lie still, wrapped in wool and memory, as the camp settles into silence around you. Your breathing slows. So much of what you've seen, so much of what you've felt, may slip away in the morning, like mist off a fjord. That's all right. Not everything is meant to be remembered clearly. Some stories live best as feelings, soft, strange, half-lit like distant stars on a foggy sea. Let yourself forget the names. Let go of the details. What matters is the rhythm you've joined, the steady beat of oars and hearts, the whisper of rituals woven through each day like threads in a cloak. You've stepped into a world where land, sea, and sky aren't just scenery. They're companions, challengers, witnesses, and as the last sounds of the forest fade, replaced by the gentle thump of your own heartbeat in your ears, know this, you're safe here. The spirits have watched you, tested you, and, for now, accepted your presence.
No storm raisis, no shadows stairs.
Just quiet, soft, ancient, and kind. So let your eyes close. Let the weight of sleep settle. Drift, slowly, into the dark behind your eyes, where the wind never stops moving and the stars always point home. And if you dream of ravens or waves or spirals drawn in ash, don't be afraid. You've learned the words. You know the signs. You'll find your way back.